Good evening to all. Dharavada Katte Dharavada, a special lecture series 2022. Dear audience, as you all know, Dharavada Katte is organizing two special lecture series in 2022. Every month, the first and second Saturday evening, 6 o'clock, we are organizing Makers of Modern Theatre, that is in Kannada. And on the third and fourth Saturday, we have another special lecture series that is revisiting Shakespearean plays. And in this connection, today we have a talk by Professor Amith Kumar PV, Professor EFLU, Hyderabad. Dear audience, I welcome Professor Basavaraja Donur, President, Dharwad Katte, to this program. I also welcome our guest speaker, Professor Amith Kumar PV, and our media persons, all the members of Dharwad Katte, and audience who are with us on this virtual platform and also with us on our social media. So Professor Amith Kumar, a few words about Professor Amith Kumar. Professor Amith Kumar PV is a professor in the Department of Comparative Literature and Indian Studies at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. He is also the director of the Finishing School at the English and Foreign Languages University. He spent time as a Fulbright visiting fellow at Portland State University, Oregon, USA, from August 2007 to June 2008, and a DAD visiting fellow at a Technical University, Dresden, Germany, from April 2015 to July 2015. He has published research articles in various international journals, mainly on Michael Bachtin's dialogic principles, with a focus on their extension and appropriation in the context of Indian literatures. His book entitled Bhakti and Translation Studies, Theoretical Extensions and Connotations, which was published in 2015, has received much critical acclaim among the scholars in the field of translation studies and modern literary theories. He has presented papers at international conferences held in countries such as Denmark, Finland, Greece, the USA, the UK, and Germany, and also delivered several keynote addresses at national conferences in India. His areas of research specialization include Bhakti studies, comparative literatures, translation studies, and disability studies. Recently, he completed a meta project on disability studies in India, sponsored by the Indian Council for Social Sciences Research, that is ICSSR. It is our pleasure to listen to Professor Amith Kumar today. Today, Sir is going to speak on the Real and Ariel reading adaptation of Shakespeare's The Tempest. The plan of today's talk is Sir will speak for 50 to 60 minutes, followed by few words by the President of Dharwad Katte, Professor Basavaraja Donur Sir. Then the platform will be open for discussion. Till then, I request all the audience to mute their audio and video and enjoy the session. Over to Professor Amith Kumar Sir. Sir, please.
Thank you, Prakash. I hope I'm audible. Am I audible?
You are audible, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. And is my screen visible?
Yes, sir. It's visible, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, Prakash, and thank you, Professor Donur, for organizing this beautiful series of lectures on Shakespeare. This is indeed a pleasure for us to participate in discussions on Shakespeare, because Shakespeare is somebody who happens to be the core of not just Indian literature, but the world literature, not just the British literature, but world literature. So it is the more we talk about Shakespeare, the more we learn a lot about our own cultural practices and literary practices. So it is indeed a pleasure for us to talk about Shakespeare. This is just a kind of a brief talk that I'm going to deliver on The Tempest. Tempest is seen as one of the last plays written by Shakespeare. Some of the important Shakespearean scholars are of the opinion that this was the last play written by Shakespeare. And Tempest brings out several kinds of interesting ideas. It is very interesting for people in the post-colonial world because it brings in the themes of post-coloniality. It talks about the colonizer-colonized dichotomy. It talks about a master-slave relationship in a very beautiful manner. It brings in very interesting ideas which are very, very relevant to the present situation. In fact, all Shakespearean plays are relevant to, that is one of the reasons why his plays are called timeless significance. So this is something which is very important and very interesting. Let me just explain the title of the talk, The Real and Ariel, reading the adaptations of Shakespeare's The Tempest. The Real and Ariel. Ariel is a character in The Tempest, as you must have noticed. It is a very interesting character, a very important character, very airy kind of a character. It is a spirit. He, she, it. We could use any of the pronouns with respect to Ariel because sometimes it is a very feminine kind of a character and sometimes it is very masculine kind of a character. Then it is also, in a way, it is a thing, it is fairy, it is neither male nor female. So it challenges our understanding of the real. So the real and Ariel are contradictory. That is what I seem to be arguing. The real and Ariel, the character Ariel challenges our understanding of the real in multiple ways. So that is the central idea in which I'm actually beginning. Ariel contradicts our understanding of the real because it stands for everything which is not real. So this character is interesting and it has generated a lot of interest in contemporary academia with respect to the manner in which this particular character figures. So reading the adaptations of Shakespeare, one of the important things is since the character in the play written by Shakespeare itself is so baffling, when it comes to adaptations, the idea of this bafflement, the surprise and shock element with respect to Ariel increases exponentially, in fact. So that is one of the reasons why I thought we should focus on the adaptations of Shakespeare. So that was the central idea. So Ariel is the opposite of the real. That's what I tried to mention. Ariel literally means a lion of a god in the Hebrew tradition. It's the lion of God. In that sense, it is not something mundane. It is beyond mundane. It is something divine. So Ariel is also used to refer to the idea of airiness, that is airy. Ariel is also used to refer to the notion of area in the sense that it is situated in a particular area, but at the same time it is intangible. So Ariel, the word Ariel itself has multiple connotations, and all these connotations suggest us that it is a very intangible kind of a word which is used to refer to certain intangible, very very flimsy, intangible spirit. That becomes the central idea here. So next, let me just talk about the contents of the presentation. Critical concerns in Shakespeare's The Tempest. What was important? Why is The Tempest such an important play? What makes it? What provides it that kind of a status? And I think all of us were watching Tempest just a little while ago, and you could see that the conversation between Prospero and Miranda that was actually taking place. So this is a play which is seen as a romance in the sense that it takes place in a mystical, it takes place in a kind of a exotic location. It is exotic. It is not in the mainland British or mainland Europe, but it is somewhere outside. It is in a exotic location, and that's the reason why. And also it talks about a kind of a love story which Prospero designs and orchestrates between Ferdinand and Miranda. So it is the critical concerns in Shakespeare. That is what I'm going to discuss in the beginning. Why does the play The Tempest become important? Then debates concerning Ariel in theoretical literature. What are the important debates that are there with respect to Ariel in the theoretical literature, and how is Ariel understood in theoretical understanding? The next idea would be Ariel in the adaptations of Tempest in the Western world. Now, we could divide the adaptations of Tempest into two parts. One is the Indian adaptations of the Tempest and the Western adaptations of the Tempest. And how does Ariel figure in the Western adaptations of the Tempest? So that will be the question. I'm going to deal with one or two examples here. In the context of Indian Ariel, that is the next idea, we'll try to look into the notion of Bhuta, Dasa, Duta, Kinnara, etc., which Ariel is addressed as Bhuta, Dasa, Duta, Kinnara in some of the Indian adaptations of Shakespeare's The Tempest. Then observations on the Indian Ariel, what are the reasons why these kinds of changes have taken place, and some concluding remarks which will raise certain discussion points. So that will be the central idea of the presentation. Yeah. Critical concerns in Shakespeare's The Tempest. So let us begin by trying to understand the significance of this particular play. As I mentioned, this is one of the last plays written by Shakespeare, and it is called a problem play. It is also called as a romance. The Tempest is presumably the last play by Shakespeare. And what becomes really very important in this play is the idea of magicality. Magicality, supernatural elements, myth, mystery, mayhem seem to be the central concerns in the play. So the play is not about a kind of a very real idea, somebody grappling with power, as in the case of Macbeth, or somebody grappling with this notion of jealousy, as in the case of Othello. So it is something about magicality, supernatural elements. It is myth, mystery, mayhem. It is a kind of a magical creations of Shakespeare that come into picture here. So in that sense, it is also about, in a way, magic realism, which we have in the postmodern situation. So in that sense, it becomes very, very significant. So the world conjured up by the play certainly lies outside the realm of history or of any known social system. This is what Wells and Gowda say in their book Shakespeare Turned East. So it is beyond the real. That is the reason why in the title itself I tried to say that it is something opposite of the real. So the world conjured up by the play certainly lies outside the realm of history or any of the known social systems. So there is no social system as such. It's about an island. And in that island, there's only one inhabitant of the island, who is Caliban. And Prospero and Miranda come to live there. And the spirit Ariel, which is sometimes there, sometimes not there, because it is a very flimsy spirit. It is present and absent both. So these are the only people who live on that particular island. So it is, for that reason, it is quite a distance from the real world, and it is a kind of a story that is projected. Shall we say that it is about the other world? The Tempest is about the other world, the other of the real. So that becomes really very important. A play which has for its context a non-Western milieu. So it is not about the Western milieu that becomes important here, because it is a non-Western milieu. So in that sense, that is the reason why this play is very, very significant in terms of post-colonial understanding, because it is about non-Western world, non-Western world, and how non-Western world becomes very, very significant for a Westerner. So in that sense, it invites us to get into post-colonial criticism. So a world where magicality acts as the governing authority. One of the important ideas is that the play brings out this notion of magicality in a very beautiful manner. Prospero, you see that in the play, he has a magical wand, he has a magic stick, and he uses that particular magic sticks to create magical environment. And his most important active magic agent is Ariel. He uses Ariel to create magic, and he uses Ariel to create the tornado, the tempest, the storm, which brings the characters there to the play. So it is, in that sense, it becomes really very important and very, very significant. It is about magicality. And the one thing that runs through this entire slide is the idea of magicality and the notion of understanding the other and a representation of the other in Western literature. A play that lends itself to multiple adaptations in the post-colonial situation. Of course, one of the beauties of this is it lends itself to multiple interpretations. And post-colonial scholars have tried to look into this as a very important idea of looking at the manner in which the savaging the civilized, which was a mission of colonialism. So that becomes, that is realized in this play in a way, because Caliban is made to behave in a civilized, quote unquote, civilized manner. Caliban is the native inhabitant of the island. So for that reason, this play becomes very significant and very important. The play lends itself to multiple adaptations and multiple interpretations in the post-colonial situation. And that is one of the reasons why many of the Indian scholars, Indian writers, have tried to look into the play and have tried to incorporate most of the important ideas that are there in the original play and modify that in their own manner, and have discussed their own representations of the post-colonial situation in their respective adaptations of the Tempest. So that is the critical concerns in Shakespeare's The Tempest. And let me just go on to the next one. This is a very famous actor, Roddy McDowall. Roddy McDowall is a very famous British actor portraying this Ariel as Ariel in Shakespeare's The Tempest. This brings out the airiness of the spirit. There's a spirit, and the kind of a crown, kind of a thing that he has shows that it is very airy, kind of a thing, and it is a non-human spirit in the sense it is the very fact that we say it is a spirit, it is non-human. So this kind of portrays in the manner in which it is sitting, it is just waiting for the command of the master. And as soon as Prospero will, as soon as Prospero says something, that's kind of the ultimate truth for Ariel. He follows that and then disappears and then does what the Prospero wants him to do and then comes back. So this is how the spirit would ideally look. This is one representation, of course. There are multiple representations of the manner in which Ariel figures. But I thought one visual representation of the idea of Ariel will help us. So this is one thing here. So this is Roddy McDowall representing Ariel, and just a kind of a representation of it is against the black backdrop, which is representing kind of the darkness of the so-called island, and then he's all white and light falls on this particular body. It speaks a lot when we get into the interpretations of it. So this just a kind of a visual representation of the idea of Ariel. Yeah. So debates concerning Ariel. Now let me just come to the central idea of the presentation, which is the debates concerning Ariel. Now Shakespeare is actually presenting us several kinds of ambiguities and paradoxes with respect to Ariel. Shakespearean paradox, ambiguities with regard to Ariel. Shakespeare doesn't provide us with a very clear-cut view about Ariel. He doesn't compartmentalize Ariel into a single category. We don't know whether he is a servant or a slave. There is a difference between servant and slave. Slave would be an extreme form of servitude. We don't know whether he's of course, he works for Prospero. So we don't know whether he is a servant or he's into this extreme form like a slave, etc. So that is one question, because all the time Ariel keeps asking is freedom. Give me my freedom. Give me my freedom. I want to be free. The spirit wants to be free. So that is one thing, that there is a confinement. There is a kind of a domination that is exerted upon this particular character. We don't know whether it is just a servant or a slave. So he plays upon this, and Shakespeare does play upon several ideas like this, and this is one such thing. Whether this particular spirit is a human spirit or a fairy, complete fairy, we don't know, because some human characteristics are attributed to this particular spirit. For example, Ariel is very compassionate and very understanding, compassionate. And the question is whether fairies don't have that kind of a compassion. So human and fairy, it is a fairy, airy kind of a creature. We talked about how it is extremely airy. It comes, that is how it gets the name fairy. Ariel. So it is human or fairy. That kind of a dichotomy, Shakespeare doesn't want to resolve it. and continues with this, because once somebody asks for freedom, it is very human to ask for freedom, liberty, and freedom. It is very human. Fairies also require freedom, or fairies are there only for the purpose of helping their masters. So that's a question which he doesn't want to resolve. White or black, we also, most of the post-colonial playwrights play upon this, white or black, and they try to see in some plays, some adaptations of Shakespeare's Tempest, you see that uh, um, 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 uh, Ariel is a mulatto being a cross between white and black. So white or black, we have confusion and deliberate confusion that is actually there. Male or female, that's again a problem with respect to Ariel, because in some respects you see that the pronoun he is used with respect to Ariel. But at the same time, the directors of Shakespearean plays have seen to it that Ariel is best represented by a female character. Actor. In terms of acting, female characters can better represent Ariel. That is what some of the directors of Shakespeare have tried to bring forth. So there is again a dichotomy between male or female, and bordering upon, just kind of the two. The desire for liberation and the compulsion for confinement. And another important thing, when I talked about servant and the slave, an extension of that idea, the desire for liberation. There is this desire for liberation, whether to get liberated and completely out of the clutches of domination, or to work for somebody and then enjoy that kind of a work by working for somebody. Compulsion of confinement. There is a dichotomy in Ariel with respect to this. One of the important ideas concerning Ariel is that Ariel is a very powerful character. Is a very, very powerful character, but subservient. A very powerful character being subservient. The Ariel is the one who creates the Tempest. And Ariel is the one who divides people there in the island and then creates deliberate confusion. And when there's a plot, it is Ariel who, kind of destroys that plot, conspiracy. So it's a very powerful character we are talking about, and at the same time, subservient. It is subservient to prosperous dictates. There is always a dichotomy. When we talk about Ariel, we cannot be free from contradictions. It represents the energy of the wind. Ariel represents the energy of the wind. The airy, as I mentioned, it is energy of the wind. It can easily bring about a change in the environment and bring about a tornado kind of a thing. It can create changes in the weather suddenly. So represents that kind of it is more a kind of a name of an energy than a character. So next. Another important idea is Ariel also represents magic and illusion. Magic is something very synonymous in the play with Ariel. And it is a character which creates hallucinations. Hallucinations. Wherever it is present, it creates certain degree of hallucination. Characters get hallucinated, and it creates a kind of a psychological condition for the other characters. So it is in that sense a very powerful force Shakespeare has tried to bring forth. In fact, that kind of an energy and power is not shown in Caliban. That kind of a force and power is certainly we cannot see that in Caliban. Caliban is just a native who is physically, very strong, perhaps, but Ariel has supernatural powers. So that is another important idea. So these are some of the debates concerning Ariel, and yeah. And another important idea concerning Ariel is this Ariel's poetry. In the play, you see that Ariel comes out with a very beautiful poetry, very interesting, and pun in the poetry. For example, you see Ariel says, "Before you can say come and go and breathe twice and cry so, each one tripping on his toe, will be here with mop and mow. Do you love me, master? No." So apart from the kind of an alliteration you have, the kind of a rhyme, etc., that you have, so there is beauty to these lines. Ariel sings. When Ariel sings, before you can say come and go, I will be present, and breathe twice and cry so. each one tripping on his toe, will be here with mop and mow. Do you love me, master? No or no. Do you love me or don't you love me? So, and Prospero very beautifully responds. Whenever Ariel comes out with extraordinary poetry, Prospero, just cannot resist and says, "Dearly, my delicate Ariel, yes, yes, that is what he's trying to say." So Ariel is bestowed with extraordinary poetry in the play. So whenever Ariel speaks in the play, you see that there's some extremely interesting poetic lines Shakespeare puts in Ariel's mouth. So that is something which is another very important feature of Ariel's character. Ariel is a poet and a very beautiful and extraordinary poet. So that seems to be another important idea. Continuing this particular idea of Ariel verse, there is also discussion in Shakespearean literature concerning Ariel verse. A focus on only the lines which Ariel has in the play. So, for example, look at this alliterative line: "Full fathom thy father lies, of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes, nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. Sea nymphs hourly ring his bell, burden within, ding dong. Hark, now I hear them, ding dong bell." Now, this is again very musical kind of line. "Full fathom thy father lies, of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes, nothing of him that doth fade." So musical, extremely musical. Nobody can deny that. So, and also these lines bring to us Ariel's mental condition, in the sense this character is a very peace-loving character. Is a very peace-loving. It is a non-destructive agent. In the sense that it doesn't believe in destruction, rather believes in construction. It's a very peace-loving character, doesn't want to destroy. He says, nothing of him that has faded. Nothing of him has faded. Nothing has happened to him. So everything is fine, perfectly all right. So peace-loving, non-destructive agent. And another important idea that you see here in these lines is that you see that this character, Ariel, is a beautifying agent, in the sense that you see that this particular character is somebody who adds to the aesthetic appeal rather than, On the other hand, when we look into Caliban in the play, Caliban doesn't add to the beauty, rather destroys it. But Ariel starts constructing and making beautiful something which is already beautiful, he makes it more beautiful, or it makes it more beautiful. So it's a fairy, So there's music, there is beauty, there is aesthetics involved. It's a peace-loving character. It is a character that hates destruction. It is an extraordinarily beautiful character. Somebody would love to have this kind of a character as one's help, or kind of develop a kind of a bond with this kind of a character. That is how the Shakespeare has created this beautiful character. So there is this entire discussion concerning Ariel verse in the critical literature. So that's What purpose that Ariel serve in the play? Most of the critics have tried to say that Ariel is the magic wand of Prospero. Prospero is the magical master. He knows occult and he knows magicality to the highest, and he needs an agent to execute that. And this is how Prospero executes this particular idea. It's a magic wand of Prospero. And he is an advocate of freedom from confinement. An advocate of freedom from confinement in the sense that he speaks for all those people. Ariel speaks for all those people who are confined and incarcerated. He's an agent of freedom. He represents an advocate of freedom, advocate of liberty and freedom. So in that sense, Ariel becomes really very important because he represents the human urge to be free. That is the reason why he is less of a fairy, more of a human. A spirit more human than humans. That is what I mentioned in the previous slide. I was talking about how he is a peace-loving person, and extremely peace-loving, doesn't want to destroy anything. Even if Prospero wants to destroy something, Ariel would consider it twice. So he works for Prospero, but then he's seen as more human than humans, a spirit which is more human than humans. So that is something which is really very important. Another important idea about Ariel is this character is a singer. He's a very melodious singer, we are told, and he's the musician of the play. He acts as the musician in the play. As we mentioned earlier, his poetry is full of music, musical pauses, rhythm, and notes. So, singer and the musician of the play, and the voice of the incarcerated people with respect to the freedom idea of freedom, and he's an epitome of forgiveness. Though he works for Prospero, he repeatedly asks Prospero to, leave him, to liberate him. Prospero says, tomorrow, tomorrow. And then at the end, when Prospero's work is done, you see that Ariel just leaves Prospero, forgives him for all the past things, and then disappears. So it's an epitome of forgiveness that we see. It's such a beautiful character. That's one of the reasons why I personally like this character more than Caliban, because of this kind of an idea of forgiveness that this character embodies. This character embodies many of the human values that we call human values. So, and he's the representative of the oppressed and the exiled, people who are exiled and oppressed, and here people who are incarcerated, people who are advocating freedom, people who are, he sings songs as a poet, and he's a magician, he's a poet, he's a musician, and he's an epitome of forgiveness too. So many characteristic features are put into this particular character, and that is the reason why this character stands out. And one of the reasons why in adaptations of Shakespeare, you see, Ariel figures in multiple manners and multiple, situations and things like that. So that is what we learn about Ariel, some of the important characteristic features of Ariel. Harold Bloom is a major Shakespeare scholar. All of us are aware of Harold Bloom and the kind of writings that he has done. Now, Harold Bloom says Ariel, a spirit of the elements, fire and air, he's a spirit of fire and air, is our largest clue to understanding Prospero. Though we know similar aid for apprehending this great sprite, plainly a contrast to Caliban. Here's a contrast to Caliban. All earth and water. Whereas Ariel is all fire and air, whereas Caliban is all earth and water. Ariel comes into the play before Caliban does, and finally is dismissed to his freedom. His last words to Prospero are, "Was it well done?" It is just like an actor speaking to the director. Did I perform well? Was it okay, my performance? Are you happy with what I have done? This is his final submission before he leaves. So this is why Harold Bloom is also a big fan of Ariel. And he says Ariel is the largest clue to our understanding of Prospero. Many things have been written on Prospero and Caliban and things like that. And I thought, let us not focus on Prospero, Caliban, but let us look into this notion of Ariel, understanding Ariel. So Harold Bloom has something very similar to what I was thinking and feeling about Ariel. So I thought I'll just quote it. So Ariel is our largest clue to understanding Prospero. It is a plain contrast to Caliban, all earth and water. Ariel comes into the play before Caliban does and finally is dismissed. So it's trying to say, was it well done, my master? So this is the way in which he submits himself to the master. This epitomizes the character. He was just an actor and the director was Prospero. So this is how Harold Bloom tries to talk about Ariel and trying to say that it is an embodiment of fire and air. Next, let's come to the next part of my discussion, which is Ariel in the adaptations of the Tempest. Now, we know that Amith has written a French adaptation of Tempest, only Tempest. 1969, Ariel is a mulatto in the play, and Caliban is a black man. So Ariel is a mulatto in the play, in the sense mulatto, as we know, is a cross between white and black. So he's born of a white man and a black mother, so he's a mulatto. So Ariel is mulatto and Caliban is total black. So Ariel and Caliban represent the struggle of the post-colonial people, though in opposite ways. So both of them represent post-coloniality in some sense in César's play, but they represent it in opposite ways. And what do they do? In fact, in the post-colonial struggle, I mean the nationalist struggles that have taken place in the erstwhile colonized countries, two kinds of struggle could be seen. One is a non-violent struggle. The second is a violent revolutionary struggle. In India, the Gandhis, etc., Gandhi represented a non-violent kind of a struggle, whereas Bhagat Singh, etc., represented a kind of a violent methods. So Ariel represents a kind of a non-violent struggle in this play. Non-violent struggle characterized by negotiation and reconciliation. You have to get your things, liberation, etc., not through violence, but through negotiation and reconciliation. That is one approach towards freedom. One approach towards freedom. The second approach towards freedom would be violent revolutionary methods, violence and kind of discarding the ideas of peace, etc., and then becoming extremely violent and resorting to violent methods of resistance. So, which was another kind of a thing, which I think Subhash Chandra Bose, etc., represented in the Indian situation, which seems to be the case here in the Caliban condition. So, Amith César, in this way, we see that Ariel is being made into a mulatto, and a fairy character is made into something very, very real. An irreal character is transformed in adaptation into a real character, because mulatto is very real. Mulatto is the reality of the day, because the cross hybridization that has been happening for a very long time between the black and the white is a reality. So we see that this kind of a transformation happens in Ariel when we look into the adaptation of Ariel by Amith César. So there is Ariel becoming something which is fairy, something which is extremely light and airy, becomes very real and weighty, very real and grounded, some kind of a thing. So that kind of a transformation is something which is visible. So I'm using a picture here from César's play. Ariel is a mulatto here. This is Prospero standing with a magic wand. And you see Ariel there as a mulatto, very humble servant, and trying to request his master to give him the freedom, provide me with the freedom. That is his constant plea, and which is considered and which is also discarded and postponed for reconsideration by Prospero time and again. Yeah. So this is a mulatto thing. With the lighting doesn't show us the mulatto features properly, but then here is it is actually a mulatto, what we see here. Another important among the Western adaptations of Tempest, there's a movie 2010, Julie Taymor's film The Tempest. This is Shakespeare's Tempest adopted into a movie, The Tempest in 2010. Ariel is played by Ben Whishaw. Ben Whishaw, some of us might be familiar with this character. He's a very famous actor in Hollywood. He has acted in James Bond movies, and he's the person who provides the technological support to James Bond, I think, in some of the movies. For example, I think Daniel Craig's movies. So Ben Whishaw has performed the role of Ariel in this movie. I don't have the film clip right now because it is not possible online to show the film clip. So I just thought I'll talk about it. So Prospero, a female character in the movie called Prospera. There's a transformation in this adaptation. So Prospero, a male, is transformed into a female here. And Ariel is made into a kind of a masculine spirit. And male-female dialectics are represented in this particular Tempest, in this version of Tempest by Julie Taymor. And one of the important ideas that we see in the movie, which is an adaptation of Shakespeare's The Tempest, is the desire for the other. There's a kind of a bond between the female Prospera and the male Ariel, So the female Prospera just cannot live without the help of this male spirit. It is a male spirit there. So Prospera's initial cruelty and later reconciliation and forgiveness are due to Ariel's humaneness. Prospera is initially extremely cruel to Ariel, but later she starts getting into the zone of reconciliation and forgiveness, and she becomes very, very human, very humane. Ariel is already a humane character, and there is nothing very special about Ariel. Ariel doesn't change the human boundaries. It doesn't cross the humanity is bestowed with. So this is a very interesting thing. I am sure one can watch this movie as a group. Juliet Amours. It is available on the internet. I think it is on Netflix or someplace. So one can easily watch this Juliet Amours film, The Tempest. As a group, one can hold group watching of this particular movie, where Ben Whishaw plays the role of this spirit Ariel, and Prospera is a female character instead of male. So this is something. Now let me come to the Indian adaptations. It is Indian adaptations of Tempest. Masti Venkatesh Iyengar, we are aware, and we have been reading Masti since our childhood days. And Masti Venkatesh Iyengar has this play Chandamaruta, published in 1959. And there's a translation of The Tempest. And Ariel is addressed by Prospero as Sevaka, Bhuta, Janu. One of the important things is it is a very, very clever, very intelligent, spirit. So Sevaka, Bhuta. So these are the terms which keep repeating in Masti Venkatesh Iyengar Chandamaruta. Tempest is literally translated by Masti as Chandamaruta. And Prospero is called Odaya, Ayya, Mahima, Mahaprabhu, Ayya, etc., etc. Prospero is the master, and then you have Sevaka. Bhuta is the word which is also used. Sevaka is used, Bhuta is used. Both words are used by Masti. Ariel addresses itself as Dasa, thereby completing the master-slave binary. So Ariel here is a Dasa. Once Prospero is called Odaya, then Ariel has to be Dasa. So the translated text is an attempt to preserve the authenticity of Shakespeare's original. So Shakespeare's originality seems to be a very important concern here for Masti, and then he seems to be, preserving that kind of an authenticity by bringing in this master-slave dichotomy here in the Indian situation. Masti is almost a kind of a literal translation, should I say, of Shakespeare's The Tempest. Kuvempu brings in this Birugali. Kuvempu writes Birugali. It's an adaptation of The Tempest, and here Kuvempu provides a different status to Ariel, and that is very interesting. Kuvempu makes Ariel a Kinnara. And in the Kuvempu's Birugali, the word that is used is Kinnara, and the other word that is used is Atimanusha Kinnara. So Ariel is not just a Manusha, not just a kind of an ordinary human being, but it is Atimanusha Kinnara, Kinnara. So Caliban, on the other hand, is called Shaniya, Ardhamanusha Sevaka. So one is Atimanusha, then Caliban is called Ardhamanusha Sevaka. So there's a clear-cut transformation in the Ariel's, Kuvempu's understanding of Ariel. Kuvempu's Ariel is not a slave, but a helper, messenger. He's called a Duta. Unlike the previous one where he is called a Bhuta, here Ariel is called a Duta. So Ariel is imbued with transcendental and subliminal elements. So there are transcendental characteristic features, because when we talk about Kinnara, we're actually trying to talk about a different kind of ethereal world, a transcendental world. Ariel acts as a foil to Caliban, and an inherent power play is discernible in the play. So he acts as a foil to Caliban. He stands for all those things which Caliban lacks. So what is Kuvempu doing here is Kuvempu is providing a gender neutral or a kind of a third gender element here. For Ariel, he is trying to make Ariel a transgender. a transgender character, because Kinnara, as I understand, is a transgender situation. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So it is a transgender, crossing the gender dichotomy and trying to place Ariel in the zone of the third gender. We only know two genders, right? So the third gender is something which is very important, and Kumar was very ahead of his times, as we know, in many of the things that he has written. So we see that this kind of a transgender understanding is provided to Ariel, and a kind of an equation between fairiness of Ariel is equated with the Kinnara idea of the Indian situation. So next is Vaidehi. Vaidehi again, Kannada, of course, we are aware of Vaidehi's writings. Dham Dhom Suntaragali is one play she wrote for children. And this is an adaptation of Tempest. And in this adaptation, it's a play for children. And you see that Ariel. So Ariel brings humor, dance, songs, and magic to the stage. So just as a Pied Piper, so your Kinder Jogi brings humor, dance, songs, and magic. In a very similar way, Vaidehi brings in this particular idea of Gali Kinnara and then situates this characteristic feature. So this is the last adaptation that I wanted to talk. This is the way in which Ariel has been seen. Let me just come to the concluding observations. So the appropriation of Ariel challenges the colonialist reading of canonical literary texts. One of the important things that appropriation of Ariel has done is it challenges the canons and tries to show how canons are a kind of a mess, and they need to be revamped and recanonized, or a canon needs to be reconstructed. So appropriation of Ariel in some sense talks about this notion of canon and the dangers of canon, because in different kinds of areas that we come across different ideas of Ariel. And that is, in a way, it stands in opposition to the existing understanding of Ariel. So thereby they challenge and subvert the canons. As against a sophisticated reading of Shakespeare, the multiple versions of Ariel bring to light differentiated and variegated readings. So what is really very important when we look into the various adaptations of Ariel is we can talk about the New World readings of Shakespeare. But the need of the hour is to understand how do we read Shakespeare from, say, Karnataka standpoint, Kannada standpoint, from our own location. Forget the Indian standpoint, it is very large. From our own standpoint, how do we read Shakespeare? So this kind of an understanding is something which is very, very significant, very important. And that is what actually happens when we look into the adaptations of Shakespeare and we look into the manner in which Ariel character is represented. So non-fixed text and non-fixed character. So one of the important ideas in adaptations is it's a non-fixed text in the sense it doesn't believe in the sanctity of the original. It transforms the original to suit the culture of the target readers. So non-fixed text and non-fixed character. Here is a character, Ariel, who is relatable and identifiable. The way in which, say, for example, Kumar transforms Ariel into Kinnara is a kind of a relatability, or the local relatability and the cultural relatability of a particular situation becomes very, very important. And that is something which comes out when we look into the multiple ways in which Ariel is received. Ariel's fluidity and malleability is something which one can write an entire thesis just on this character, Ariel, and the manner in which Ariel figures in the Shakespeare adaptations of Tempest, the fluidity of Ariel's character. Ariel, as we know, it challenges racist dichotomies, challenges the gender dichotomy, challenges the Marxist understanding of, this haves and have-nots, things like that. So various kinds of things are being brought to the fore, and, it is subverted. So Ariel decenters the human subject in a way. It decenters the human subject because it is only humans who are supposed to have certain values. But here is a fairy and a spirit seems to be having so many kinds of values, and that is the reason why it is, in a way, it is actually decentering the human subject in itself. So that is another important idea. Next is Ariel brings out resistance through mimicry. Ariel is also mimicking his master. And through the act of mimicking his master, he's resisting his master. So that is what we have when Baba talks about mimicry and ambivalence at length in Location of Culture. So a similar kind of a trait and issue could be noticed here. Ariel resists through mimicry, something which is very, very important and very, very significant in the post-colonial adaptations of The Tempest.
ಆರಾಮಿದ್ದಿ ಚಂದ ಇದ್ದಿ ಕಣ್ ಚಲೋ ಇದ್ರೆ ಇನ್ನೇನು ಚಲೋ ಇರಂಗಿಲ್ಲ
ಹಂಗಲ್ಲ ಹಚ್ಗಳದಾವ್ ಮಾತ್ರ ನೀವು ಮಮ್ಮಿ ಒಂದಿಷ್ಟು ಮಂದಿ ಈಗ ನಮ್ ನಾಗಣ್ಣರಿಗೆ ಅವ್ರು ಕೆಲ ಚಟ ಯಾಕೆ
Mr. Virendra, please mute your.
ನಿಮ್ಮ ಮನ್ಯಾಗ ಕೂರ್ತಿದ್ದ ಆ ಚಟ ಬಂದಿತ್ತು
Mr. Virendra,
ನಿಮ್ಮಲ್ಲಿ ಚಲೋ ಚಟ ಅವನ್ ಇಟ್ಟು ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡ್ತೀರಿ ಆಯ್ತು ಚಲೋ
Mr. Virendra. Sorry for the
Okay. So that is my presentation, and thank you very much for listening to my presentation. And I'll stop here, and probably we'll open it for questions and discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I request President Darwar Katte, Professor Basavaraj Donu, sir, to speak a few words. Sir, please.
Good evening to you, Dr. Prakash. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir. Please.
Okay. Good evening to you. I'm very happy that Professor Amith Kumar participated in our program today and talked on the last play of Shakespeare, The Tempest. Professor Amith Kumar is one of the very important professors of English working in IFLU. He is my very good friend and a very great scholar. I am proud of his scholarship. And I'm not here to repeat what he has said. I don't deliver any presidential remarks. I can only make one or two observations on this occasion. And Professor Amith Kumar, in his almost 50 minutes presentation, touched upon the different dimensions of the last play of Shakespeare. He talked about various dichotomies, binaries, and master-slave relationship. He could touch upon very important dimensions of the play. And I like this play for various reasons. And I also consider this play to be the last play of Shakespeare. I think Amith has some problems with this, whether it is one of the last plays or it is the last play. I think we can read this play profitably if we considering it as the last play. I see some kinds of similarities between Prospero and Shakespeare. What I'm going to say is not a very new thing. These are not the original ideas. Critics have already talked a lot about the similarities between the two. If we regard Tempest as the last play, as I said, there are some profits. And one of the profits is, Shakespeare as a man reached a stage at the end of his life where he could forgive his enemies. And we all know that Shakespeare faced problems in London because he was new to London when he went to London and started his career. And his career lasted for about 2 decades, I think 2 decades or 2.5 decades. And during the 25 years, 2.5 decades, Shakespeare faced problems. He had admirers, he had his own critics. There were people who liked him and who condemned him and who did not recognize him as a major playwright and made fun of him, etc. And when he left London and went back to his place of birth, he reached a point where he could forgive his enemies. And Amith is right when he said that the play talks about forgiveness. So forgiving your enemies. What is important in life is forgiveness. We all know that when we forgive, we are forgiven. And when we don't forgive and take revenge, then we'll have to face problems. So we become divine when we forgive, and we become, Satan or the devil when we take revenge. The play talks about this forgiveness, and Prospero could forgive everybody, including his brother who expelled him, who banished him from his own kingdom. This is one observation I wanted to make. And about these two characters, the Ariel and Caliban, Amith made very wonderful observations. I like Professor Amith for his brilliant observations, for his original observations, for his insights, and the way he reads the text, the way he analyzes the text, and the different perspectives from which he analyzes the play. For example, he discussed this play from the point of view of colonialism, and also from several other critical perspectives. And only there is an interesting thing about the Ariel. So the Ariel is not a slave, but there is an element of slavery in him. And Caliban is slave, but Caliban can protest against his own master. And he doesn't recognize, Caliban doesn't recognize Prospero to be his master. And Caliban can make fun of him, can even attack his daughter, and use the language that he has learned from Prospero to criticize him. You have taught me language, I know how to abuse you. That's what he says. So this is an interesting play, and the play can be read, as I said, from the post-colonial perspective as well. And I think I should stop here. And we have heard a wonderful talk. I thank Professor Amith on behalf of all the viewers and on behalf of the Katte. And now I request the viewers to interact with Professor Amith Kumar. Thank you so much. Over to Prakash. Prakash.
Thank you, sir. Now the platform is open for discussion. You can share your opinions, discuss with Professor Amith Kumar, sir, and also ask questions. Before that, I just throw light upon what Miss Avanti Prasad asked here. You can get all the presentations on our Dawar Katte YouTube channel. Yes. Sir, there are many questions in the chat box. Shall we take the questions, sir?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Miss Pooja Kugnor, can you read it? Pooja Kugunawar.
Hello, can you hear me, Prakash sir?
Yes, madam, please go ahead.
So this is Pooja Halyar from Rani Chennamma University, Belagavi. It was a pleasure listening to Amith Kumar sir's very erudite talk today. Benefited immensely from the kind of conceptions that he formulated here for me. Thank you so much, sir. So my question is regarding, you did mention that Ariel is the fire element and Caliban could be taken as the earthly element there. Could we read this, in the light of Carnat's conceptions of fire and rain, that he presented in the fire and the rain play of his?
Yeah, I do not have a complete understanding of Karnat's understanding of fire and rain, though I have read the play long ago. What is really very important about Ariel is that this is a character who is made out of this one of the at least one or two of those Panchabhuta that we talk of. So and Caliban is the other, kind of. There are other elements which go into the making of Caliban. So this is certainly not an earthly spirit. This is certainly something which is airy, something which is fire, which is always up in the environment, high up there somewhere. So this is what defines, Ariel's existence. So that is the reason why he has been called fire and air, and whereas Caliban is called earth and water because he's so very ground to earth, and in fact, I think it has something to do with the color of the skin also. So I think I do not know about Karnat's understanding. Maybe somebody could elaborate upon that. If Karnat's fire and rain, I was only played too long ago. I do not know in which perspective you are trying to look at that. But then certainly Ariel as a fiery spirit, as a kind of a spirit of the air, is something which is understandable, and I think that's a different idea altogether. I don't know whether I answered your question because I do not know Karnat's fire and rain's conception. I may have to go through it to look into what exactly is that.
So one of the interpretations of Carnat's Fire and Rain could be, the kind of dichotomy between Aryans and Dravidians there, where the two characters, Nithilai representing the earthly character, and the final, rain on the fire. That kind of a dichotomy is presented there. One of the interpretations. So if we can if we can relate those two, compare those two, and present it that way. I don't know. It's just a random thought that occurred.
Okay. In that sense, I think Ariel is maybe because I'm old, it is slightly larger. It is slightly larger and very comedic character. It's very ambivalent kind of a character.
ಚೆಕ್ ಪೋಸ್ಟ್ ಇದೆಯಲ್ರಿ? ಆಯ್ತಾಯ್ತು.
Yeah.
ಇದು ಮುಗಿಲಿ ಮುಂದೆಲ್ಲ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತೀನಿ.
It's a very ambivalent kind of a character. And it is not possible for us to associate Ariel with. In the adaptations of Shakespeare, we see that he has been extended to various levels. So, in that sense, I do not know whether it could be the right association. It is not possible. It's only that it is fiery and airy. It is more with respect to certain elements of nature and which is a concrete social identity. Yeah, that is what I feel. It is more a kind of a one with nature. Another idea that I didn't talk about, which you are reminding me, is this dichotomy between nature and culture, and how Ariel is more of a nature, akin to nature kind of a character. So that.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. I think Professor Sharath Kumar. Sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, please.
Sir, very good evening, sir. Professor Amith.
Good evening.
Your presentation was really entertaining, enlightening. At the same time, it simply got me engrossed into that very play. I just was imagining the whole play in front of me, sir. That was really wonderful of you. Only as you mentioned, sir, just a small suggestion here. Kinnaras and Kimpurushas, these are all the heavenly beings, sir. As it is introduced, they are introduced in the Mahabharata in the beginning itself. These are the airy spirits, as you mentioned it correctly. These are the airy spirits who keep on a watch on human beings, sir.
Yeah.
And as far as my knowledge of Sanskrit goes, Kinnaras are male and Kinnaris are female. And there is a particular Veena instrument as well, sir. If you go somewhere near Tanjavur,
Okay.
I well believe I actually heard about a Veena type or a separate instrument, or it's the same instrument given the same name. I'm not very clear about it, but there is a particular instrument called Kinneri Veena. Kinneri Veena is one particular instrument, sir. Once I was there and they were talking about it. I'm trying to recall that particular thing, sir.
Okay.
So Kinnaras are actually masculine and Kinnaris are actually feminine, sir. They are actually introduced in the Mahabharata at the outset. So they try to set the thing straight. They try their best to advise the people in such a way, like the two students of Dr. Faustus who keep on advising that they should actually leave the devil and come back to the Lord. Something like that, sir. Some sort of that kind of thing they actually do. Just I wanted to indicate this one, sir. Otherwise, I learned how to be professional in a particular lecture series, sir. Thanks for it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind words. I just wanted to add to what you said.
Sir.
Isn't there an association of Kinnara? The word Kinnara is associated with the idea of transgender, because Kinnar.
I think
Kinnar
yes,
is there is an association with Kinnar. The Kinnar they're all in a way. So I think
somewhere there, sir.
Where I
something like Kinora, something, sir. some time ago actually happened here. Kinora something. I don't exactly recall it, sir.
Okay. I have come across this association of crossing the gender boundaries. Male,
Sir.
female are only two things that we are aware of, and in others,
Yes.
transgenders. They, in that sense, they're transgressive. They're transgressive kind of a compartment we actually have.
So they are going away from the compartmentalized, what is called world of masculine and feminine, those things.
Yes.
They are just, trespassing those limitations, sir. The confinements are broken and they just simply go into the next level of energies, as you correctly said, sir.
Yes.
I feel so. In that case, they actually have some kind of freedom, which is a little beyond the levels of freedom that we experience day to day, sir. That's how I see, sir.
Correct. I totally agree with you. That is the reason why Ubuntu actually makes the Skinner as well.
Yes, sir. Correct.
On one hand, subliminal character, sublimity is divinity, sublimity is activated, reality is attributed. At the same time, social confinements of gender are crossed, and that's the reason why it's neither male nor female. I thought so. I was thinking on those lines, but when you say that there is in the read, then I have to relook at it. Thank you for that, sir.
I'm really grateful to you, sir. Have a nice time, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. There is Ms. Subhi Kumari. Subhi Kumari has asked a question. Donald, sir, your mic is unmuted. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, sir. I have a psychoanalytical reading of the play The Tempest.
Yeah, psychoanalytical play, reading of the play is absolutely possible. And I think a lot of ideas could be looked into the notion of the unconscious, the notion of the collective unconscious, the idea of the mirror stage, etc., which are there very much in the Freudian psychology, Jungian psychology, and Lacanian understanding of psychoanalytical theories. What could be taken into consideration to understand the play. I think that works fine. A separate presentation would be required for that. I think it's a very good idea. One can take into consideration the idea of unconscious and the manner in which unconscious figures in the play, and discuss it at some length. Maybe also the idea of Oedipal complex and how there is this Oedipal notion, and also Electro complex. Miranda is in some sense obsessed with Prospero. So there are several psychological possibilities, possibilities that one can actually look into. I think it's a very promising idea. One can look into that. And as I said, maybe a separate presentation would have helped to understand that. I see there is a lot of hope in that kind of understanding. Yeah.
There is one more question posted by Praveen Patel. Dr. Praveen Patel. Sir, can you read? I think.
Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Praveen, go ahead.
Hello, sir. Yeah, good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Sir, actually, just sir, thank you for this lecture, by the way, and it was great to hear you after a long time.
Yeah.
And actually, sir, I was thinking about this idea of human values. Including the idea of forgiveness in Ariel. So I was thinking, does Shakespeare knowingly or unknowingly put Ariel as a superior being compared to human beings, and trying to show that human beings have somehow fallen short of the ideas of liberty, equality, freedom, forgiveness. So putting like a non-human being as superior to human beings.
That is exactly the point. That is exactly the point of the play, because Ariel is the one who teaches Prospero the idea of forgiveness. Ariel teaches a lot of things to Prospero. I think in one of the slides I mentioned this, that Ariel imparts certain kinds of ideas to Prospero. Prospero learns from Ariel. And Prospero, being a non-human spirit, trying to impart some kind of a knowledge to the humans is something which is really very important and very significant. And Prospero learns, and that's how Prospero forgives. Prospero forgives what has happened in the past, and then leaves things and then goes away. So this is precisely the case. I think Prospero learns the human values from a non-human spirit. I think that is the hallmark of the play. That is the hallmark of the play, and that fits well into my presentation because all the time I was trying to say that he's a peace-loving character, and he's a forgiving epitome of forgiveness, and he's somebody who would not like to have destruction. He's somebody who is extremely, a person who is open for negotiation, and open for any kind of a reception. So I think you're absolutely right when you say that Ariel is in some sense provides an example for Prospero to follow.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you, sir. The platform is open for discussion. Anybody can discuss with Professor Amith Kumar, sir. You can ask questions, add your opinions. Our all talks are available on our YouTube channel, Dharwad Katte YouTube channel. And also we have Facebook page. There also the link is shared. Anybody would like to discuss with Professor Amith Kumar, sir? Would like to ask questions? So our all social media platforms, YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, and our WhatsApp groups are active. You can also participate in the discussion. You can post your questions, queries in our YouTube channel also. Thank you. I come to the second of the program. I thank Professor Amith Kumar, sir, for accepting our invitation and giving such a valuable talk today on the Tempest. Sir, thank you so much. I also thank Professor Basavaraj Donur, President of Dharwad Katte, Registrar, Central University of Karnataka, who is the backbone of all the events and these 2C ongoing series on Dharwad Katte. I thank our media persons who are making it possible to reach all our events through their print media, electronics medias every week. I also thank the members of Dharwad Katte, General Secretary Srimati Vijayalakshmi Reddy, Treasurer Dharwad Prakash Balikai, Teja Rangaswamy, Bhagyasri, Shivraj, Rohit, and other members who are working behind the screen for the successful of the events. Once again, I thank the audience who are the real strength of all our events. We have been with us in our social media and in all the WhatsApp groups. We will be sharing all the links and the information about our events. Please be connected with us. Next week, that is coming Saturday, sharp at 6 o'clock, we are going to listen to Professor C. Naganna, a renowned writer from Mysore. That's all for today's. Thank you, one and all. We will meet in the next week, Saturday, that is sharp at 6 o'clock. Thank you, one and all. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Donor, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Good night.
Good night.